Key limes are one of my sneaky favorite fruits to grow at home, but they can actually be a little bit particular. Now, just a second, I don't want to scare you away from growing them because you definitely should. But after having a key lime tree for several years, there are a few things that I've found that you don't really hear talked about a ton that can make or break your fruit harvest. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 5 things you might not know about growing key limes and why you'll definitely want to. The first thing is that key lime trees are pickier about watering than you might think. Now, I think most gardeners know that citrus trees in general love sun. We're talking 6 to 8 hours of full direct sunlight every single day. Really 8 hours plus, 6 kind of is your bare minimum. And that's if, of course, you want the best quantity and quality of fruit possible, which I for sure do. But I think it's easy to miss how your watering habits are connected to that. Because if you think about it, full sun, especially once the heat spikes, means that the soil, of course, dries out really, really quickly. And inconsistent watering is the thing that can make or break a citrus tree. The second you space out your waterings too far or the soil gets a little bit too dry, you're going to see it. The tree will let you know. Your leaves will start to kind of curl and droop, and it'll drop blossoms, it'll drop baby fruits, and if it gets bad enough, it could cause like long-term harm to the tree. But then on the other hand, if you overwater, you're also going to see issues. You'll see drooping, yellowing, or browning leaves. You're going to again see fruit drop and blossom drop. I mean, key lime trees will drop fruit and blossoms at the drop of a hat the minute that they're stressed out by anything, especially water. So here's the trick: deep, even watering. And consistently. So I'm not talking a little sprinkle like every single day. I'm talking water all the way through the root ball. For example, if it's in a pot, you want to see the water coming out of the bottom of the pot. If it's in the ground, you want a slow, steady, long drip of moisture to mimic what you would get from a natural rainfall. In between waterings, you want the top few inches of soil to dry out, but no more than that. You don't want it to get too dry in between waterings. Something that can really help is a layer of mulch on top. Again, whether it's in the ground or in a pot, mulch is going to help keep the soil temperature consistent, keep the water from evaporating too quickly. And that can be really helpful in the hot summer. With key lime trees being so picky about watering, it really helps if you can control the growing environment as much as possible. And that leads me to my next thing. Another thing you might not realize is that key lime trees really kind of prefer being grown in a container. Now, there are exceptions to this. If you live in a hotter zone like zone 10 or 11, you might have the perfect conditions to grow this semi-tropical or tropical tree. But for most of us, your best option is going to be growing in a container. And that's for several reasons. Basically, so that you can control the whole growing environment. So let's first talk about soil. Key lime trees really need well-draining soil. This goes back to the watering thing from a second ago. You want the water to be able to drain through freely, and that's really important. They hate sitting in soggy soil. They hate having wet feet. If you sneeze, they'll get root rot. I mean, it's just so easy, and once again, they'll start dropping all of their fruit, all of their blossoms. They're sensitive little trees. So you want to be able to control the soil environment that they're growing in, and that includes soil pH. Citrus trees love soil that's slightly acidic, so we're talking roughly between a 6 on the pH scale up to about 7.2, maybe 7.5. But 7 is neutral, so we want to keep things just below that, a little bit acidic, so you can get or make a potting soil that is perfectly suited to your key lime tree. I have an article about citrus potting soil on the Fruit Grove blog, which I will link to in the description so you can get more details about that. But whether you buy or you make your own soil, that is going to be key for keeping your key lime tree happy. Another bonus to containers is size. Most key lime trees that you'll buy from nurseries are grafted onto some sort of dwarfing rootstock that's going to help keep the tree manageable in terms of size. But putting it in a container will do even more to restrict the size of the tree because the root ball only has so much room to grow, and therefore the canopy will correspond to that. The good thing about growing in a container is that you can control the size of the container. So as the tree grows, you can size up. If the root ball gets too big for the container, you can trim it. you can keep the tree pruned. And because key lime trees have these awesome sort of densely packed, small, bright green leaves, they're so great at absorbing that energy from the sun, and they can put out a ton of fruit even on a small tree like this one. So you get a pretty big bang for your space buck. Basically, containers give you options about the soil, about the size of the tree, and about location. If you need to move the tree to get it to a sunnier spot as the sun shifts throughout the growing season, that's a great idea. You can also move the tree to a different sort of microclimate as the temperatures start to cool down. Maybe you want to tuck it next to a fence or by your house to protect it from frost. Or you might need to move the tree over the winter, and that leads me to my next point. Another thing you might not know about key lime trees specifically is that they can't stand the cold, like not even a little bit. There are other kinds of citrus trees, even though they're all in this sort of tropical to semi-tropical range. Some citrus trees can tolerate a little bit of cold. Meyer lemons, for example, they'll be okay, usually down to about 30 degrees, give or take. Some of the Satsuma varieties, one I'm thinking in particular called Arctic Frost, it'll be good down to maybe 25, maybe even 20 degrees, depending on the situation. Key limes are not that way, not at all. I mean, weather as mild, say, as about 40 degrees Fahrenheit can damage new growth. And even a little bit colder than that can cause like whole portions of the tree to die. And so you really have to be careful to protect your key lime tree from any sort of cold if you live in a climate that gets any cold. And that is why I like growing them in containers. That's why that's essential, so that you can protect the tree. So what I do is I keep a really close eye on the weather forecast. As soon as I see the temperatures approaching 40 overnight, I know that that's my signal to protect the tree somewhere for a little while close to the house. I actually have a sunroom on the back of my house that is open, it's screened in, but if I tuck it close to the house, that's enough to keep it protected from frost and to just raise things a few degrees and give it that microclimate that's going to keep it happy longer. And then as the temperatures start dropping even lower, I bring my key lime tree into the garage, something sheltered, something that's going to keep the temperatures around 40 or not much below that, so that you can keep your key lime tree protected from frost. Now let's say you've had perfect watering habits, you've protected your potted key lime tree from any sort of cold temperatures. Well, there's another thing you need to know that's going to make a really big difference. Number 4 on the list of things you might not know about growing key limes is that fertilizer makes all the difference. Now, I'm not talking about that as like fertilizer will solve all of your problems, because I don't think that's true. But the reality is, especially because, as we've discussed, most of us are going to be growing key limes in a pot, those nutrients that are available in the pot for the tree are going to flush away very quickly. And if we're not regularly replacing them, you're going to notice that your key lime tree struggles. It might look okay, but it'll struggle to fruit. Or maybe you've noticed a lot of yellowing of the leaves. That is a telltale sign of nutrient deficiency. So you really do need a fertilizing regimen. Even in the ground, key lime trees respond really well to regular light fertilizing, just to make sure that they're getting all of the nutrients they need. What do they need? Citrus trees do need a good amount of nitrogen in order to set fruit. They also need a lot of important micronutrients. I do have a whole detailed video all about fertilizing potted citrus trees. So I'm going to refer you to that, probably up here, so that you can kind of get all of the details and the full breakdown of how I fertilize my citrus trees. But what you really need to know is that for key lime trees in particular, it's not that they're ravenous trees like some other fruit trees can be. Meyer lemons, I'm looking at you. They tend to be pretty hungry. Key lime trees, like I've noticed, it's not that I have to feed my key lime tree a ton, but it's that those regular light feedings have made a really big difference in keeping the fruit on, keeping the leaves nice and bright green, keeping the tree vigorous and healthy so that it can withstand the pressures that do come. And we're going to talk about that next in item number 5. But for now, just know that fertilizing regimen is going to be really important. I typically fertilize my key lime tree about once a month, give or take, depending on the weather and how much I'm watering it. And like I said, I do a really lightweight feeding of an organic granular citrus fertilizer that has a good bit of nitrogen, that first NPK number. And then I also like to use a fish fertilizer on that. So again, if you need more details, refer to that other video, but just be aware that key lime trees do need to be fertilized. We can't talk about growing a key lime tree without talking about pests. And that's the last thing you might not know, is that pests will happen, but especially when the tree is stressed out. The minute the tree gets stressed by drought or overwatering, by some big weather event, by a sudden temperature swing, by uncontrollable things like high heat and humidity, which is what I have to deal with. The minute those things stress out the tree, that's when you're gonna see pests show up, and you will see them. So what do you do about it? Well, prevention is your best friend. Item number one is just keeping the tree as happy and healthy as possible by doing all of the things that we've talked about in this video. But the other thing is just observing the tree. Get in the habit of checking it out just about every day, because whether you grow the tree outdoors most of the year like I do, or whether you have to bring it in for a big portion of the year because it gets too cold, either way you're gonna see pests show up. Some of the things that I run into with my citrus trees, and particularly this key lime tree, I've had issues with scale insects. I see aphids, definitely leaf miners I see on all of my trees, but prevention is usually the way to keep that under control, or noticing it before the infestation gets too bad. And then I can use control measures like trimming off the affected areas if it's only like in certain isolated spots. Another thing I do is wipe down the leaves periodically to get rid of any sooty mold or any of that sticky residue from aphids that attracts other pests. And then you can use like an insecticidal soap or neem oil, which are both organic sprays that can help either get rid of pests that are currently there or prevent future ones from coming. Now, just be careful not to spray when the tree is in bloom, because we don't want to run any risk of harming any pollinator insects. Inside the house, you might notice things like spider mites because it's just this drier environment. So keeping the tree lightly moistened, you can spray down the leaves, you can wipe them down with insecticidal soap, can help prevent and keep the spread of something like spider mites. No matter the situation, the key is not to panic, because pests will happen. But if you're keeping an eye on the tree, you can catch it before it gets too bad. And once you've lined up all of the aspects of care, watering, light, fertilizing, temperature, all of the things we've talked about in this video, that's when the magic happens. And this is the magic right here. Yes, I did make myself a single serving key lime pie in the microwave, and it's gonna be awesome. The good thing is key limes really are pretty easy to grow. And once I figured out these few key things, I went from having just an inconsistent, like mediocre crop to having a good harvest of limes every single year, something I can rely on. And I use those limes for everything. I substitute them for regular limes in all sorts of recipes. Obviously, key lime pie is the best. I also love key limes in cocktails or in fresh limeade. I mean, nothing beats it. So let me know in the comments if any of these tips maybe have surprised you, or let me know if you have any favorite ways to use your homegrown key limes. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and now I'm gonna eat this pie. Can't believe I did this in the microwave.